The silence in my new apartment felt different from the silence I'd grown accustomed to over the past 3 months. This wasn't the comfortable quiet of solitude, it was the hollow echo of starting over, of unpacked boxes stacked against unfamiliar walls, of a life suddenly stripped down to its bare essentials. I sat cross-legged on the hardwood floor, surrounded by the remnants of the relationship I'd just escaped, wondering if I'd ever feel whole again. My breakup with Claire had been inevitable, but that didn't make it any less devastating. 2 years of my life had dissolved into awkward text exchanges about who would keep the coffee maker and whose name was on the Netflix account. The worst part wasn't the fighting or even the loneliness. It was the way I'd started questioning everything about myself, about whether I was capable of the kind of love that lasted. Drop a comment if you've ever felt that instant spark with someone unexpected, because I was convinced I'd never feel anything close to that again. The apartment hunting had been a blur of Craigslist ads and awkward meetings with potential roommates who seemed more interested in my credit score than my personality. I'd almost given up on finding someone compatible when I stumbled across Hannah's posting. Her message was warm and genuine, describing herself as a clean, respectful professional who loves cooking and believes in creating a home, not just sharing space. Something about her words felt different from the sterile roommate ads I'd been scrolling through for weeks. Now, sitting in our shared living room with my belongings scattered around me like pieces of a puzzle I couldn't quite solve, I wondered if I'd made the right choice. The lease was signed, the deposit paid, and Hannah would be moving in tomorrow. I'd spoken to her exactly twice, once over the phone and once during a brief apartment viewing where she'd smiled easily and asked thoughtful questions about my work-from-home setup. She seemed genuinely interested in creating a comfortable living situation, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was too emotionally fragile to be anyone's roommate right now. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister Sophia. "How's the new place? Are you eating actual food or just surviving on cereal and self-pity?" I stared at the message, realizing I couldn't remember the last time I'd cooked a real meal. The past few months had been a haze of takeout containers and microwave dinners, of going through the motions of living without actually engaging with life. I'd been working from home since the breakup, telling myself it was more convenient, but really I was just avoiding the world and all the ways it might remind me of what I'd lost. The truth was, I'd built walls around myself so high that I wasn't sure I remembered how to let anyone in. Dating felt impossible. The thought of explaining my recent breakup, of being vulnerable with someone new, of risking another heartbreak made my chest tight with anxiety. I downloaded and deleted dating apps at least a dozen times, swiping through profiles of women who seemed confident and put together, everything I wasn't feeling about myself lately. Claire had been my first serious relationship after coming out, and losing her felt like losing my roadmap to happiness. We'd met at a friend's party, and I'd been so sure she was the one I'd been waiting for. She was brilliant and funny, with dark hair that caught the light when she laughed and a way of making me feel like I was the only person in the room. For 2 years, I'd built my life around our shared routines, our inside jokes, our plans for the future. When it ended, I didn't just lose my girlfriend, I lost my sense of who I was supposed to be. The apartment felt too quiet without her presence, too empty without the familiar sounds of someone else living and breathing in the same space. I'd grown accustomed to the gentle chaos of shared life, 2 coffee cups in the sink, her books scattered across the coffee table, the way she hummed while getting ready for work. Now I was left with the stark reality of my own company, and I wasn't sure I liked what I found there. I stood up and walked to the kitchen, opening the refrigerator to find nothing but a half-empty carton of milk and some leftover Chinese food that had definitely seen better days. The sight of my pathetic food situation made me realize how much I'd been neglecting myself, how I'd been sleepwalking through the basic acts of self-care that used to come naturally. I made a mental note to go grocery shopping before Hannah arrived, to at least pretend I was a functional adult who could maintain a household. The evening stretched ahead of me with no plans, no obligations, no one expecting me to be anywhere or do anything. It should have felt liberating, but instead it felt like drowning in possibility without the energy to swim. I'd been telling myself that this time alone was necessary, that I needed to rediscover who I was outside of a relationship, but mostly I just felt lost. The person I'd been before Claire felt like a stranger, and the person I was becoming felt uncertain and fragile. As I settled back onto the floor with my laptop, scrolling through work emails I had no motivation to answer, I wondered if Hannah would be the kind of roommate who minded if I spent entire days in my pajamas, or if she'd judge me for the way I'd been living lately. Part of me hoped she'd be busy with her own life, giving me space to continue wallowing in my comfortable misery. But another part of me, a part one barely wanted to acknowledge, hoped she might be the kind of person who could help me remember what it felt like to be fully alive again. The sound of keys jingling in the hallway made me look up from my laptop, where I'd been pretending to work for the past 3 hours. My heart did this weird little flutter, part anxiety, part hope, as I heard footsteps approaching the door. Hannah was here. I'd been dreading this moment and anticipating it in equal measure. Living alone had become suffocating, but the thought of sharing my space with someone new felt overwhelming. What if she was one of those people who talked constantly? What if she judged the way I'd been living, takeout containers stacked on the counter, laundry piling up, the general air of someone who'd given up on basic adulting? The door opened, and suddenly my apartment filled with energy I hadn't felt in months. Hannah burst through carrying 2 oversized duffel bags, her cheeks flushed from the cold, dark hair escaping from a messy bun. She was prettier than her photos suggested, not in a polished way, but in that effortless manner that made you want to keep looking. "Harper," she called out, dropping her bags with a theatrical sigh. "I made it. And only got lost twice, which is basically a miracle for me." Her laugh was infectious, the kind that made you want to smile even when you'd forgotten how. I stood up, suddenly aware of my rumpled sweatshirt and the fact that I probably looked like I'd been hibernating. "Hey, welcome home," I said, and was surprised by how natural the word home sounded. Hannah's eyes swept the apartment, taking in the sparse furniture and the general emptiness that came with recent heartbreak and a fresh start. But instead of the judgment I expected, her expression softened with something that looked like understanding. "This is perfect," she said, and I could tell she meant it. "I love what you've done with the place. Very minimalist chic." I laughed to spite myself. That's a generous way to put it. "I'm still figuring out how to make it feel like home." "Well, that's what I'm here for," Hannah said, already moving toward the kitchen. "I'm basically a professional homemaker. Not in the 1950s housewife way, but in the I will cook for you and make everything cozy way." She opened the refrigerator, and I watched her face carefully catalog its pathetic contents: leftover Chinese food, energy drinks, and a carton of milk that might have been questionable. She didn't comment, but I saw her make a mental note. "So," she said, turning back to me with genuine curiosity, "tell me about you. I know you work from home doing something with graphic design, but what's your story? What brought you to this apartment?" The question was casual, but there was something in her tone that made me feel like she actually wanted to know. Not just the surface details, but the real answer. I found myself settling onto the couch, and she joined me, tucking her legs under her in a way that made the space feel instantly more intimate. "I just got out of a relationship," I said, testing the words. 2 years with someone who was brilliant and funny and completely wrong for me. I needed a fresh start. Hannah nodded, her expression thoughtful. "That must have been hard." "How long ago?" "About a month." I was surprised by how easily the words came. "I've been kind of hermiting since then." "Not my finest moment, honestly." "Hermiting is underrated," Hannah said seriously. "Sometimes you need to go underground for a while to figure out who you are without someone else." She paused, then added, "I just did the same thing, actually. Broke up with my boyfriend Eric 3 weeks ago." "What happened?" I asked, genuinely curious. Hannah was quiet for a moment, her fingers tracing patterns on the couch cushion. "He was a good guy, but I kept feeling like I was playing a role. Like I was being the girlfriend he wanted instead of being myself." Does that make sense? It made perfect sense. More sense than I was comfortable with. "Yeah," I said softly. "It does. Can I ask you something?" Hannah's voice had that careful quality people use when they're about to venture into personal territory. "What's it like being gay? I mean, not the political stuff or whatever, but just personally." "How did you know?" The question caught me off guard. Most straight people either avoided the topic entirely or asked in a way that felt clinical. But Hannah's curiosity felt genuine, like she was trying to understand something important. It's hard to explain, I said slowly. For me, it was less about knowing and more about finally admitting something I'd been trying not to see. Like when you're wearing shoes that don't quite fit, you can walk in them, but you're always aware something's off. Hannah nodded, her eyes never leaving my face. That's exactly how I felt with Eric. Like I was wearing the wrong size life. Something in her tone made me look at her more carefully. There was a vulnerability there that felt familiar, like looking in a mirror. What about you? I asked. Have you ever questioned things? I don't know, she said quietly. I mean, I've always assumed I was straight because that's what everyone assumes, right? But lately I've been wondering if I just never let myself consider other possibilities. The air between us felt charged suddenly, like we were approaching something neither of us had planned to discuss. I could feel my heart beating faster, and I wasn't sure if it was anxiety or something else entirely. It's never too late to figure yourself out, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. Sexuality can be fluid. Some people know from childhood, others discover new things about themselves later. Hannah was quiet for a long moment, and I wondered if I'd said too much. But when she looked at me again, there was something different in her expression, a kind of openness that hadn't been there before. Would you mind if I asked you more about it sometime? She said. I feel like I've been living in this bubble, and talking to you, it feels like maybe I've been missing something important about myself. Of course, I said, and meant it. Anytime. Hannah smiled then, and it was like watching the sun come out. Thank you for being so open with me. I feel like I can be myself around you in a way I haven't felt in a long time. Same, I admitted, and realized it was true. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe properly. Okay, Hannah said, standing up and clapping her hands together. Enough heavy talk for day one. I'm making us dinner. Real food, not whatever you've been surviving on. And tomorrow morning, I'm making you the best breakfast you've ever had. Consider it my thank you for letting me crash your hermit cave. As she moved toward the kitchen, humming softly to herself, I felt something shift inside me. The apartment didn't feel empty anymore. And for the first time since Claire, I found myself looking forward to tomorrow morning. The next morning, Harper woke to the sound of sizzling in the kitchen and the rich aroma of coffee brewing. She padded out in her oversized sleep shirt to find Hannah standing at the stove, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, humming softly as she flipped what looked like perfect golden pancakes. Morning, Hannah said without turning around, as if she'd sensed Harper's presence. I hope you don't mind, I raided your pantry. Found some decent flour buried behind all those instant noodle cups. Harper rubbed her eyes, still adjusting to this new reality of shared mornings. You didn't have to. I wanted to. Hannah glanced over her shoulder with a warm smile. Besides, I'm pretty sure your diet consists entirely of coffee and whatever delivery app is fastest. Someone needs to make sure you're actually eating real food. There was something about the way Hannah said it, not judgmental, just caring, that made Harper's chest tighten. She'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone notice her habits, to care enough to do something about them. Coffee's fresh, Hannah added, nodding toward the counter where Harper's favorite mug sat waiting, already filled and steaming. Harper wrapped her hands around the warm ceramic, inhaling the familiar comfort. This is really nice of you. It's nothing. But Hannah's cheeks flushed slightly as she plated the pancakes, arranging them with the kind of attention Harper usually reserved for her design work. I like taking care of people. Eric always said I was too much, you know? Too invested in the little things. That's not too much, Harper said quietly. That's just thoughtful. Hannah's smile softened, and for a moment they just looked at each other across the kitchen. Harper felt something shift in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the coffee. Over the next few days, the breakfast ritual became their routine. Hannah would wake early, moving quietly around the kitchen while Harper worked at her laptop in the living room. The sounds of cooking became Harper's new alarm clock, and she found herself looking forward to those morning moments in a way that surprised her. You're going to spoil me, Harper said one Thursday morning, watching Hannah arrange fresh berries on top of French toast. Good. Hannah's response was immediate, almost fierce. You deserve to be spoiled. The conviction in her voice made Harper look up from her laptop. Hannah was standing at the counter, her hands still on the plate, looking directly at Harper with an intensity that made her breath catch. I mean it, Hannah continued, her voice softer now. I've been watching you these past weeks, and you're so hard on yourself. You work all day, barely eat, and then you sit here scrolling through those dating apps like you're shopping for groceries instead of looking for someone who might actually see you. Harper felt exposed, like Hannah had been reading her thoughts. I'm not really looking for anything serious right now. Maybe that's the problem. Hannah brought the plate over, sitting down beside Harper on the couch instead of across from her at the table. You're so focused on protecting yourself that you're not letting anyone actually get close enough to matter. Their thighs were almost touching, and Harper could smell Hannah's shampoo, something floral and warm that made her want to lean closer. Getting close is how you get hurt. Getting close is also how you get loved. Hannah's voice was gentle, but there was something underneath it that Harper couldn't quite identify. Your ex, Claire, she hurt you, didn't she? Harper nodded, not trusting her voice. Want to talk about it? Harper had been avoiding this conversation for weeks, deflecting whenever Hannah asked about her past relationships. But sitting here in the morning light, with Hannah's genuine concern radiating between them, the words came easier than expected. She was brilliant, Harper said finally. Funny, ambitious, everything I thought I wanted. But she was also distant. Even when we were together, I felt like I was constantly trying to earn her attention. Like I was never quite enough to hold her interest. Hannah's hand found Harper's knee, a light touch that sent warmth spreading up her leg. That says more about her than it does about you. Does it? Because I keep thinking maybe if I'd been more interesting more. Stop. Hannah's grip tightened slightly. Harper, look at me. Harper turned, and suddenly Hannah was closer than she'd realized, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in her brown eyes. You're interesting, Hannah said, her voice barely above a whisper. You're talented and kind, and you notice things other people miss. The way you arrange your workspace, the way you remember exactly how I like my coffee after seeing me make it once. You're not too much or too little, you're exactly right. Harper felt tears prick at her eyes. You don't know me that well. I know enough. Hannah's thumb traced a small circle on Harper's knee. I know you stay up too late working because you're afraid of lying in bed with your thoughts. I know you order Thai food every Tuesday because it was Claire's favorite and you're trying to convince yourself you're over her. I know you're scared to let anyone see how much you care because caring made you vulnerable to someone who didn't deserve it. Hannah. Harper's voice cracked. I also know, Hannah continued, her eyes never leaving Harper's face, that you have the most beautiful smile I've ever seen, and you should use it more often. And that you hum when you're concentrating on a project, and it's the most peaceful sound in the world. And that you deserve someone who sees all of that and chooses to stay. The air between them felt charged, electric. Harper was acutely aware of Hannah's hand on her knee, of the way Hannah's breathing had quickened, of how close they were sitting. You're going to make some guy very happy, Harper said, trying to lighten the moment, but her voice came out strained. Something flickered across Hannah's face, confusion, maybe, or disappointment. Right. Some guy. She started to pull her hand away, but Harper caught it without thinking, their fingers intertwining naturally. I didn't mean, Harper began, but she wasn't sure what she meant. All she knew was that she didn't want Hannah to move away, didn't want this moment to end. It's okay, Hannah said, but she didn't try to pull away again. I know what you meant. But Harper wasn't sure she did know. Because sitting here, looking into Hannah's eyes, feeling the warmth of her touch, Harper was beginning to suspect that what she'd meant and what she'd felt were two very different things. Thank you, Harper said finally. For seeing me. For this. She gestured at the breakfast, at the care Hannah had shown her. You don't have to thank me for caring about you, Hannah replied. It's not exactly difficult. The words hung between them, loaded with meaning Harper wasn't sure she was ready to examine. But as they sat there, hands still linked, Harper felt something she hadn't experienced in months, hope. Not just for healing, but for the possibility that maybe, just maybe, she was worthy of the kind of love Hannah seemed to see in her. Even if Hannah could never be the one to give it to her. The morning light filtered through the kitchen window as Hannah set down 2 steaming mugs of coffee, her movements more deliberate than usual. Harper watched from the doorway, still in her pajamas, noting how Hannah's shoulders carried a tension that hadn't been there the week before. They'd been living together for 3 weeks now, and these quiet morning moments had become Harper's favorite part of each day, a dangerous realization that she'd been trying to ignore. "You're up early," Hannah said, glancing over with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I was going to bring this to your room." Harper patted across the cold tile floor, accepting the mug with both hands. The warmth spread through her palms, and she inhaled the familiar scent of Hannah's perfectly brewed coffee, strong enough to wake her up, but with just enough cream to soften the edges. "Couldn't sleep," she admitted, settling onto the bar stool across from where Hannah stood at the counter. "Bad dreams." Hannah's voice carried that gentle concern that had become so familiar, so necessary to Harper's healing process. She leaned forward slightly, her elbows resting on the granite surface, closing the distance between them in that subtle way she'd been doing more and more lately. "Not bad. Just restless." Harper wrapped her fingers around the mug, using it as an anchor. "I keep thinking about things I probably shouldn't be thinking about." Hannah's eyes searched Harper's face, and there was something different in her expression, more vulnerable, more open than the confident woman who'd moved in 3 weeks ago. "What kind of things?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that Harper wasn't sure she was ready to voice. She'd been here before, reading too much into straight women's kindness, mistaking friendship for something deeper. But Hannah's morning coffee rituals, the way she'd started lingering in conversations, the gentle touches that seemed to happen more frequently, it all felt different from simple roommate consideration. "Hannah," Harper said carefully, setting down her mug. "Can I ask you something? And you promise you'll be honest with me?" "Of course." Hannah's voice was barely above a whisper, and Harper noticed how her knuckles had gone white where she gripped the edge of the counter. "Why do you make me breakfast every morning?" The question came out more vulnerable than Harper had intended, and she immediately wanted to take it back, to retreat into the safety of casual conversation about work or weekend plans. Hannah was quiet for a long moment, her gaze dropping to the space between them. When she looked up again, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Because I like taking care of you," she said simply. "Because when I see you smile after that first sip of coffee, it makes my whole day better. Because..." She paused, taking a shaky breath. "Because I've never felt this way about anyone before, and it terrifies me." Harper's heart hammered against her ribs. "What way?" "Like I want to know everything about you. Like your happiness matters more than my own. Like when you laugh at something I said, I feel more myself than I ever did with Eric." Hannah's words tumbled out in a rush, as if she'd been holding them back for weeks. "I know what you're going to say, that I'm straight, that I'm confused, that this is just some phase because I'm rebounding from my breakup." "Hannah, but I'm not confused about how I feel when I'm with you." Hannah's voice grew stronger, more certain. "I'm confused about everything else, about what it means, about what I'm supposed to do with these feelings, about whether I even have the right to feel them. But I'm not confused about you." Harper felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble. The same walls she'd built after Claire's emotional distance had left her feeling invisible and unwanted. "You don't understand what you're saying," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. "I've been down this road before, Hannah. I've fallen for straight women who thought they were curious, who liked the attention, who wanted to experiment. It never ends well. I'm not experimenting with you." Hannah moved around the counter, closing the physical distance between them until she was standing directly in front of Harper's bar stool. "I'm not curious about women in general. I'm curious about you. About us. About what it would feel like to stop pretending that these feelings aren't real." Harper looked up at her, seeing the fear and hope warring in Hannah's expression. "You told me not to fall for you," she whispered. "The second day you moved in, you said you were straight, and I shouldn't get any ideas." "I know what I said." Hannah's hand moved to rest on the counter beside Harper's arm, close enough that Harper could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. "I said it because I was scared of what I was already starting to feel. I said it because I thought if I said it out loud, I could make it true. But I can't, Harper. I can't make these feelings go away, and I don't want to anymore. What about Eric? Harper asked, grasping for any reason to protect herself from the hope that was blooming in her chest. You were with him for 8 months. You loved him. I cared about Eric, Hannah said, her voice growing more certain with each word. He's a good man, and he deserves someone who can love him the way he deserves to be loved. But I never felt with him what I feel when I'm sitting across from you at breakfast. I never felt like he really saw me, not the way you do. Harper's breath caught. How do I see you? Like I'm enough, Hannah said simply. Like my terrible jokes are actually funny. Like when I ramble about my day, you're not just waiting for me to finish talking, you're actually listening. Like you see all the parts of me I usually hide and you like them anyway. The vulnerability in Hannah's voice broke something open in Harper's chest. She'd spent so many mornings watching Hannah move around their kitchen, noting the way she hummed while she cooked, the way she always made sure Harper's coffee was perfect, the way she seemed to light up when Harper emerged from her room. She'd told herself it was friendship, that she was projecting her own loneliness onto Hannah's kindness. Hannah, Harper said, her voice barely audible. I'm scared. Of what? Of getting hurt again. Of falling for someone who's going to wake up one day and realize they made a mistake. Of letting myself believe that this is real and then having it disappear. Harper's words came out in a rush, years of heartbreak and disappointment spilling over. Claire used to say she loved me, but she never really saw me. She was always looking past me, thinking about work or her friends or anything else. And I convinced myself that was enough, that being loved halfway was better than not being loved at all. Hannah's hand moved to cover Harper's, her touch gentle but firm. I'm not Claire, she said. And I'm not going anywhere. I know I can't promise you that figuring this out will be easy, or that I won't be scared sometimes. But I can promise you that what I feel for you is real, and it's not going away just because it's complicated. Harper looked down at their joined hands, noting how perfectly Hannah's fingers fit between her own. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. I don't know how to help you figure out your sexuality while protecting my own heart. Maybe we figure it out together, Hannah suggested, her thumb tracing small circles on Harper's knuckles. Maybe we don't have to have all the answers right now. Maybe we just have to be brave enough to see where this goes. Harper met Hannah's eyes, seeing her own fear reflected there, but also something else, a determination that reminded Harper of the woman who'd moved in 3 weeks ago and immediately started making their apartment feel like home. What if you decide you're not actually attracted to women? What if this is just about me being safe and available? Then I'll have learned something important about myself, Hannah said. But Harper, I don't think that's what this is. When I imagine my future now, you're in it. When I think about what I want my life to look like, it's this, these morning conversations, taking care of each other, building something real together. Harper felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. I want that too, she whispered. I want it so much it scares me. Then let's be scared together, Hannah said, lifting their joined hands to press a soft kiss to Harper's knuckles. Let's see what happens when we stop running from this. Harper nodded, feeling something shift inside her chest, not the walls crumbling, but a door opening. Okay, she said. But we go slow. We figure this out as we go. And if you need space to process what this means for you, you tell me. I will, Hannah promised. And if you need reassurance that this is real, that I'm not going anywhere, you tell me. Harper squeezed Hannah's hand, allowing herself to believe, for the first time in months, that maybe she deserved this kind of love, the kind that showed up every morning with perfect coffee and genuine interest in her thoughts and feelings. I'm still going to be terrified, she admitted. That's okay, Hannah said, her smile finally reaching her eyes. I'm terrified too. But I'd rather be terrified with you than safe without you. 3 weeks had passed since our conversation on the couch, and something had shifted between us. The air in our apartment felt different, charged with possibility and weighted with unspoken truths. Hannah still made me breakfast every morning, but now there were longer glances, fingers that lingered when passing the coffee mug, conversations that felt like confessions wrapped in everyday words. This morning felt different from the moment I woke up. I could hear Hannah moving around the kitchen earlier than usual, the soft clatter of dishes mixing with the sound of something sizzling in the pan. When I finally emerged from my room, still in my oversized sleep shirt and shorts, I found her standing at the stove making what looked like French toast, my absolute favorite. "You're up early," I said, padding barefoot across the cold tile to the coffee maker where a fresh cup was already waiting for me. "Couldn't sleep," Hannah admitted, not turning around. There was something in her voice, a nervousness that made my stomach flutter. "I kept thinking about what you said the other night." I took a sip of coffee, grateful for something to do with my hands. "Which part?" "About not falling for you." She finally turned to face me, and I could see the conflict in her eyes. "I can't stop thinking about it." My heart started beating faster. We'd been dancing around this for weeks now, both of us too scared to say what we were really feeling. Hannah had been questioning everything since Eric, asking me about my relationships, about what it felt like to know you were gay, about whether attraction could surprise you. "Hannah," I started, but she held up a hand. "Let me finish." She turned back to the stove, flipping the French toast with more concentration than necessary. "I've been thinking about why I broke up with Eric. I told myself it was because we wanted different things, because the timing was wrong. But that wasn't really it." I set my coffee down on the counter, my hands suddenly shaking. "What was it?" "It was because being with him felt like playing a role. Like I was performing what I thought love should look like instead of feeling it." She plated the French toast carefully, adding fresh berries and a dusting of powdered sugar. "And then you moved in, and suddenly I understood what it felt like to want to take care of someone. Really take care of them." She carried the plate to our small dining table, and I followed, settling into the chair across from her. The French toast looked perfect, golden and crispy on the outside, soft in the middle, exactly how I liked it. But I could barely focus on the food with Hannah looking at me like that. "You make me breakfast every morning," I said quietly. "I know." She reached across the table, her fingers brushing mine. "I tell myself it's just being a good roommate, but that's not true, is it?" I shook my head, not trusting my voice. Her hand was warm against mine, and I could feel my carefully constructed walls crumbling with each gentle touch. "I've never felt this way about a woman before," Hannah continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've never felt this way about anyone before. Not even Eric. Especially not Eric." "Hannah, you don't have to." "Yes, I do." She squeezed my hand. "I need to say this. I need you to know that when I told you not to fall for me, I was really telling myself not to fall for you. Because I was scared of what it would mean." I looked down at our joined hands, at the way her thumb was tracing small circles on my skin. "And now? Now I think I was wrong about what I wanted. Wrong about who I am." She paused, taking a shaky breath. "I think I've been wrong about a lot of things." The French toast sat forgotten between us, as we stared at each other across the table. I could see the fear in her eyes, but also something else, determination, maybe. Or hope. "I don't want to hurt you," I said finally. "I don't want to be some experiment while you figure things out." "You're not an experiment, Harper. You're..." She struggled for words. "You're the first person who's ever made me feel like myself. Really myself. Not the version of me I thought I was supposed to be." I felt tears prick at my eyes. After Claire, after months of feeling like I was too much, too intense, too complicated, Hannah was telling me I made her feel like herself. "I'm scared," I admitted. "Me too." She stood up, still holding my hand, and walked around the table to stand beside my chair. "But I'm more scared of pretending this isn't happening." I looked up at her, this woman who had filled my empty apartment with warmth and laughter, who noticed when I was having a bad day and left little notes in my laptop bag, who made me breakfast every morning like it was the most natural thing in the world. "I warned you not to get too close," I said, my voice barely audible. "Maybe that would be okay," she had said that night on the couch. Now, standing so close I could smell her shampoo, she whispered, "I think I was wrong about what I wanted." She reached out with her free hand, her fingers gentle against my cheek. "Can I?" Instead of answering, I stood up, bringing us face to face. She was taller than me by just a few inches, and I had to tilt my head up to meet her eyes. The morning light streaming through our kitchen window caught the gold flecks in her brown eyes, and I wondered how I had ever thought I could live with her and not fall completely. "I thought you said not to fall for you," I whispered. I think I was wrong about what I wanted, she repeated, her voice so soft I almost didn't hear her. And then she was leaning down, and I was rising up on my toes, and our lips met in the middle. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, like we were both afraid the other might pull away. But when I didn't retreat, when I instead brought my hand up to cup the back of her neck, she deepened the kiss with a soft sigh that made my knees weak. She tasted like coffee and possibility, like everything I had been afraid to hope for. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she rested her forehead against mine. I've wanted to do that for weeks, she admitted. Really? Really. Every morning when I make you breakfast, every time you smile at me, every time you tell me about your day. She trailed off, her thumb brushing across my bottom lip. I kept telling myself it was just friendship, but friends don't make each other feel like this. I closed my eyes, letting myself feel the weight of her words. Like what? Like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. When I opened my eyes, she was looking at me with such tenderness that it took my breath away. This was Hannah, my roommate, my friend, the woman who had brought color back into my gray world without me even realizing it was happening. What happens now? I asked. I don't know, she said honestly. I've never done this before. I don't know how to be with a woman, I don't know what it means for us. But I know I can't pretend anymore that what I feel for you is just friendship. I nodded, understanding completely. We can figure it out together. You'd want to? Even though I'm confused about everything? Hannah, you're not confused about everything. You're just figuring out who you are. That's not the same thing. I reached up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. And I'd rather figure it out with you than wonder what might have been. She smiled then, the first real smile I'd seen from her all morning. The French toast is getting cold. I don't care about the French toast. You love French toast. I started, then stopped, the words too big and too soon. I love that you know I love French toast. But we both heard what I hadn't said, and from the way her eyes softened, I knew she felt the same way. Maybe it was too soon to say it, but it was there between us, warm and real and terrifying. Come on, she said, tugging me back toward the table. Let me take care of you. That's what I want to do. As we sat back down to eat breakfast together, her hand finding mine across the table, I realized that maybe falling for your straight roommate wasn't always a recipe for heartbreak. Sometimes, if you were very lucky, it was a recipe for something beautiful. The morning light filtered through the kitchen window as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling and replaying every second of the kiss from the night before. Hannah's lips had been so soft, so hesitant yet certain at the same time. The way she'd whispered, "I think I was wrong about what I wanted," kept echoing in my mind, and I couldn't decide if I should be terrified or hopeful. I could hear her moving around in the kitchen, the familiar sounds of breakfast preparation that had become such a comforting routine over the past few weeks. But now everything felt different. The clatter of dishes seemed more deliberate, the opening and closing of cabinet doors more careful. Was she as nervous as I was? Did she regret it? My phone buzzed with a text from my sister Sophia. "How's the roommate situation working out?" I stared at the message, wondering how to even begin answering that question now. Taking a deep breath, I forced myself out of bed and into the bathroom. My reflection looked back at me with messy hair and uncertain eyes. I'd been here before, that morning after vulnerability where everything hung in the balance. But this felt different from my relationship with Claire. This felt like standing at the edge of something that could either heal me or break me completely. When I finally made my way to the kitchen, Hannah was standing at the stove with her back to me, her shoulders tense in a way that told me she was just as unsure as I was. She'd made pancakes, my favorite, and I could smell the vanilla she always added to make them special. The coffee was already brewing, and she'd set out the good mugs, the ones we usually saved for weekends. "Morning," I said softly, not wanting to startle her. She turned around, and I caught the flash of nervousness in her eyes before she smiled. "Morning. I hope you're hungry. I might have made too many pancakes." Her voice was careful, like she was testing the waters. "I'm always hungry for your cooking," I replied, then immediately wondered if that sounded too loaded with meaning now. We moved around each other in the kitchen with an awkward politeness that felt foreign after weeks of easy familiarity. Hannah poured my coffee exactly how I liked it, 2 sugars, splash of cream, but her hands shook slightly as she handed me the mug. When our fingers brushed, we both pulled back too quickly. Harper, she started, then stopped, biting her lip. About last night. We don't have to talk about it if you don't want to, I said quickly, my old defensive instincts kicking in. I mean, if you're having second thoughts, or if it was just... No. Her voice was firm, surprising both of us. No, I'm not having second thoughts. I'm scared, but I'm not having second thoughts. She set down her coffee mug and looked directly at me. I've been thinking about it all night, and I keep coming back to the same thing. I've never felt like this before. Not with Eric, not with anyone. My heart did something complicated in my chest. What do you mean? She leaned against the counter, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her sleep shirt. With Eric, everything felt expected. Like I was following a script of what I was supposed to want. But with you, it's like I'm discovering parts of myself I didn't know existed. She paused, her cheeks flushing pink. When you touch me, when you look at me the way you do, I feel more like myself than I ever have. I wanted to reach for her, but something held me back. Hannah, I need you to be sure. I can't, my voice cracked slightly. I can't go through another situation where someone realizes they made a mistake. Is that what happened with Claire? The question caught me off guard. I'd mentioned Claire in passing, but I'd never really talked about what went wrong. Claire was brilliant and funny and everything I thought I wanted. But she was always holding back, always keeping part of herself separate from us. She said she loved me, but she never really let me in. I wrapped my hands around my coffee mug, using the warmth to steady myself. I spent 2 years trying to prove I was worth letting in, and it nearly broke me. Hannah's expression softened with understanding. I'm not Claire. I know you're not. But you're also not gay, and you're figuring out something huge about yourself, and I struggled to find the words. I'm terrified of being your experiment. She was quiet for a long moment, and I could see her processing what I'd said. Then she moved closer, close enough that I could smell her shampoo and see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. Harper, look at me. When I met her gaze, she continued. I know I can't prove this to you overnight, and I know you have every reason to be scared. But what I felt last night, what I feel right now, it's not an experiment. It's the most real thing I've ever experienced. How can you be so sure? Because I've spent 3 weeks trying to talk myself out of it, she said with a small laugh. I've made every excuse, told myself it was just curiosity or loneliness or whatever. But every morning when I make you breakfast, every time you smile at something I've said, every time we stay up too late talking, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. The pancakes were getting cold on the counter, but neither of us moved to eat them. We stood there in the morning light, the weight of her words settling between us. I don't know how to do this, I admitted. I don't know how to trust again without protecting myself. Then we'll figure it out together, Hannah said simply. We don't have to have all the answers right now. We just have to be willing to try. She reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away if I wanted to. When I didn't, she took my hand, intertwining our fingers. I know I'm asking you to take a risk on me on us. But Harper, I think you're worth the risk. I think we're worth the risk. Looking into her eyes, I saw something I'd never seen with Claire, complete openness, vulnerability without reservation. Hannah wasn't holding anything back. She was offering me everything she had, even though she was just as scared as I was. Okay, I whispered. Okay, let's try. Her smile was radiant, and when she leaned in to kiss me again, it felt different from the night before. Less tentative, more certain. Like a promise we were both ready to keep. When we finally broke apart, she rested her forehead against mine. So, about those pancakes. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in months. They're probably cold by now. I can make fresh ones, she said, and there was something in her tone that made it sound like more than just an offer about breakfast. Like she was saying she'd keep making them morning after morning for as long as I wanted her to. I'd like that, I said, and meant it completely. 3 weeks had passed since that morning when everything changed between us, and I was still learning to trust the quiet contentment that had settled into our daily rhythm. Hannah continued making breakfast every morning, But now these moments came with soft kisses pressed to my temple as she set my coffee down, whispered conversations about our plans for the day, and the kind of domestic intimacy I'd never experienced with Claire. I watched her move around the kitchen in her oversized sweater and pajama shorts, humming softly as she flipped pancakes with practiced ease. The morning light caught the golden highlights in her hair, and I felt that familiar flutter in my chest, the one I'd stopped trying to suppress weeks ago. She'd started calling herself bisexual, testing the word out in conversations with me until it felt natural on her tongue, and I could see how much more authentic she seemed now that she'd given herself permission to explore this part of herself. "You're staring again," Hannah said without turning around, but I could hear the smile in her voice. "Can you blame me?" I replied, stretching lazily at the kitchen table. "You make breakfast look like art." She turned to face me, spatula in hand, and the look she gave me was so full of warmth and certainty that it took my breath away. "I love taking care of you," she said simply, and I felt my heart do that thing it had been doing lately, opening wider than I thought possible. The pancakes were perfect, just like everything else Hannah did with such natural grace. As we ate, she told me about her phone call with her sister the night before, how she'd finally told her family about us, about her evolving understanding of her sexuality. "Mom asked if I was sure," Hannah said, cutting another bite of pancake. "And I told her I'd never been more sure of anything in my life." I reached across the table to take her hand, marveling at how natural the gesture had become. "How do you feel about that?" "Terrified," she admitted with a laugh. "But also free? Like I've been living in a house that was too small for me, and suddenly I found all these rooms I didn't know existed." That afternoon, as we curled up on the couch with our laptops, me working on a logo design for a local bakery, Hannah grading papers from her substitute teaching job, I found myself stealing glances at her concentrated face. She'd bite her lower lip when she was thinking, a habit I'd grown to find endearing. Sometimes she'd catch me looking and smile, or reach over to squeeze my knee, these small gestures of affection that felt revolutionary after Claire's emotional distance. "Harper," Hannah said suddenly, closing her laptop. "I've been thinking about something." I saved my work and turned to face her fully. "What's on your mind?" She tucked her legs underneath her, that nervous energy I'd learned to recognize flickering across her features. "Your sister Sophia called yesterday while you were at the grocery store. She invited us both to dinner next weekend." My stomach fluttered with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. "Both of us?" "She specifically asked if I was your girlfriend," Hannah said, her cheeks flushing pink. I didn't know what to say. We'd been existing in this beautiful bubble of tentative romance and domestic comfort, but we hadn't really defined what we were to each other. I knew what I wanted, had known for weeks, but I'd been too afraid to push for clarity, too worried about scaring Hannah away when she was still figuring things out. "What did you tell her?" I asked quietly. Hannah reached for my hands, her fingers intertwining with mine. "I told her I hoped I was, but that I should probably ask you first." The vulnerability in her voice, the way she looked at me with such hope and determination, made my chest tight with emotion. "Hannah, I know I'm still figuring things out," she continued, her words coming faster now. "I know I'm probably not the easiest person to be with right now, and I know you're scared of getting hurt again. But Harper, what I feel for you, it's nothing like what I felt with Eric. It's nothing like what I thought love was supposed to feel like." She paused, taking a shaky breath. "With Eric, everything felt expected. Like I was following a script someone else wrote. But with you, everything feels like a choice I'm making because I want to, because you make me want to be braver and more honest and more myself than I've ever been." I felt tears prick at my eyes, the walls I'd built around my heart finally crumbling completely. "I want that too," I whispered. "I want to be your girlfriend. I want to go to dinner with Sophia and hold your hand and not be afraid of how much I care about you." Hannah's face broke into the brightest smile I'd ever seen. "Really?" "Really," I said, and then she was kissing me, soft and sweet and full of promise. When we broke apart, Hannah rested her forehead against mine. "I love you," she whispered, the words so quiet I almost missed them. "I love you too," I replied, and for the first time in months, I felt completely unguarded, completely safe. The next morning, Hannah made my favorite breakfast, blueberry pancakes with real maple syrup, and as she set the plate in front of me, she pressed a kiss to my cheek and whispered, "Good morning, girlfriend." I pulled her down for a proper kiss, tasting sweetness and possibility on her lips. "Good morning," I murmured against her mouth. "I could get used to this." "Good," Hannah said, settling into the chair beside me instead of across from me, close enough that our knees touched. "Because I'm not going anywhere." As we ate breakfast together, planning our day and discussing what to wear to dinner at Sophia's, I realized that Hannah had been right that first morning when she'd told me I deserved someone who saw how incredible I was. I'd just never imagined that someone would be her, my straight friend who'd warned me not to fall for her, then proceeded to make me breakfast every morning until I had no choice but to fall completely, beautifully, safely in love.